What's up, YouTube? This is Too Raw for TV. All right, so shout out to Tiki TV for his video just now. I was looking at it where he talks about an interview that was done on Art of Dialogue where a police officer that I guess has some expertise in these situations involving Keefe D, how likely they are to go to trial and whatnot. And I think the officer, I forget his name, but the officer talks to people in the entertainment industry, reporters who, you know, have knowledge of these types of situations from covering them over the years. And he pretty much believes that it's likely that Keefe D is going to plead not guilty, and that a plea deal more than likely is not going to be part of this situation, and that he believes it's likely it's going to go to trial, and he thinks there's a great chance, especially if cameras are allowed in the courtroom, that this could be bigger than the O.J. Simpson trial. And something tells me that if cameras are involved in a situation, something tells me that if it does go to trial, I wouldn't be surprised if cameras are allowed in the courtroom. I want to do an update on the situation with Suge Knight. Now, it was being said that Suge Knight, of course, the former CEO of Death Row, he, of course, was in the vehicle. He was in the driver's seat, and on that particular night when Tupac was shot, he is one of only two remaining eyewitnesses that were allegedly there. He would be asked to testify, but he has made it abundantly clear, according to TMZ, that he is not going to testify. And not only would he not testify, he pretty much says without saying who he thinks did it. He doesn't think Keefe D was the shooter. So this is what he had to say.
Tell me what your reaction is to the arrest of Keefe D.
Well, surprise number one, because I didn't think Keefe D would never get arrested. Nor do I want to see him get arrested. You know, let's get one thing straight, first and foremost. You know, me and Keefe D played on the same Pop Warner football team. And whatever the circumstances, if he had an involvement with anything, if he didn't have any involvement with anything, who want to see, I wouldn't wish somebody going to prison on my worst enemy.
The DA says that Keefe D was in the car with his nephew, and that presumably his nephew, according to the DA, is the one that shot Tupac, and that it was done with the full knowledge of Keefe. Do they have it right?
It was only two people in the car. And Pac not going to tell the story. I ain't going to tell the story, but I tell you this. And I never had nothing bad to say about Orlando because, number one, he wasn't the shooter. Number two, he came to my hearing and told to let me go and told the truth. They still didn't let me go.
If you are called to testify in this case?
I wouldn't be.
Why not?
Yeah, I wouldn't be.
Why not?
Well, number one, because I'm not going to get on the stand and testify on somebody for what?
They seem to be saying that Orlando was the shooter and Keefe was in on it, that he had full knowledge of what was going down, and it was revenge for Orlando getting beaten up by Tupac and his team at the MGM after the Tyson fight. Is that correct?
No.
Then who shot Tupac?
It wasn't Anderson, so that's all I got to say about that part.
To summarize, you are saying Orlando was not the shooter, although you won't say who the shooter was. You are not saying whether Keefe was involved in any way in the shooting. And you are saying that if you're called to testify by either side, you will not comply, you will not testify. Do I have that right?
1,000%. I wouldn't go, I wouldn't testify, none of that.
All right, so you heard Suge Knight say that he will not testify for either side, not the prosecution nor the defense in this upcoming situation that they go to trial, and like it most likely will. And you know, on the one hand, it makes sense because Suge is an old school, you know, I guess you call it an old school G, you know what I'm saying, that has a certain code. They would look at that situation. Most people in that situation look at it like snitching. Whereas a lot of these new age Thundercats, man, you know, they talk a good game, but they're the first ones making a deal just snitching on people, you know what I'm saying? At the smallest hint of having to do time. So that makes sense, you know? And also, I always kind of look at it like a lot of old school gang members look at the police department like the Nation of Islam look at white folks. You know what I'm saying? It's the enemy. They're the enemy. So anything that gets, any justice that has to be done, you know what I'm saying, it'll be done in their world, not the police world. That still takes precedence over any ensuing beefs that you have with others. Now, you kind of don't really see that mindset no more. But it's becoming fewer and fewer as far as the generations now. So you can kind of look at it like that, right? Say you play on a football with Keefe D. I mean, I get that. I get that. Okay. One thing that I kind of always been bothered by with Suge Knight, and by no means have I been the biggest follower of this thing. Like, I know some people on here, they've been studying this shit like meticulously for the last 27 years. Every day. I mean, guys that could go on and on and on. I'm not that thorough with this, but I used to be a little bit more knowledgeable of this case. But over the years, you know, I've kind of fallen off with some of my studies. But one thing that this kind of brings back up to me is I do think that the relationship between Suge Knight and Tupac is overstated. Ever since Tupac died, Suge sometimes give you the impression that him and Pac were like boys. They were cool. But a lot of evidence seemed to suggest it was more, or even if it was like that at one point, toward the end it was becoming more of a business relationship. It was more of a business relationship, and that had soured. Because I think I've read that Tupac found out that he had jewelry that he didn't own, vehicles that he didn't own. Death Row owed him millions of dollars. And, you know, I don't want to, you know, there's always been this theory that if it wasn't, you know, P. Diddy that had this whole thing, you know, been involved in this whole thing, there was another theory put out years ago that maybe Suge had something to do with this. But the thing that always gets in my way when it comes to this theory, whenever I think about it, and it does make some sense, right? It makes some sense. But the thing that gets me is, because I've heard the payoffs to Orlando Anderson, and why would Suge pay off Orlando Anderson if he didn't have an involvement with it, and all of this. And some of these things make a lot of sense. But the thing that always bothers me is, if Suge was at the center of this, why would he put himself in such close proximity to Tupac at the scene? I don't care how good a marksman someone is, all right? I'm not going to feel comfortable putting myself in that type of situation, right? Then you hear conflicting reports that initially they were supposed to shoot from the other side, which would have been Suge Knight's side, but they got blocked off or something. So then that's why they went and shot over on the side where Tupac was. I don't know. Then you heard some eyewitnesses reports that said that the arm that came out of the vehicle was big. It was a big arm. Now, that wouldn't be Orlando Anderson, obviously. Nor would that be Keefe D. Now, Suge says that it was only two people in the car, Orlando Anderson and Keefe D. And he said, he seems to indicate that Orlando nor Keefe is the shooter. But there's somebody shooting. If I'm not mistaken, I think that's what he just said, right? Well, somebody shot from the motherfucker. And so, you know, what I've also heard is it was a guy named Big Dre. Big Dre, I think, died like 10 years ago. So, you never really hear his name get popped up. But some people say that it was him that did the shooting. So this thing, man, you know, I remember when this thing was really fresh back in the 90s. Oh, man, like we didn't have an internet back then. But it was everywhere. Everybody was talking about it. Everybody had their own theories. And I could definitely see this being bigger than the O.J. Simpson trial. If this thing gets greenlit to the point where they have cameras in the courtroom, you know. Even if they don't have cameras in the courtroom, it can still be pretty goddamn big, you know. But anyway, tell me what you guys think, man.